Hello everybody and welcome to class 6 of sil201 Intermediate Silhouette Effects with me, Ben Brownlee. This week we are going to be taking a quick look at the power map feature. We spent quite a bit of time now looking at some detail roto stuff, so we've looked at hair, we've looked at hands, and all of these fine details do take time to cut out properly. But when we look at power map, we're going to look at a way of trying to sort of short circuit some of those more time-consuming elements. Now, this tool is not suitable for every piece of footage and every situation, so we'll be discussing times where we're not going to use it, as well as times where we are. So under my session settings here, and I could have done this when I started up a new session, of course, is to turn on my power mat node. I'm also going to turn my keyer node on as well here, just to show us the difference between these here. So if we take a look at this guy now, so in the first instance we're really going to be looking at the gun here and seeing how we can extract the gun. So there does seem to be a good amount of contrast between the foreground and the background here. So if we look at our keyer, come to our luminance key here, and just pull that back, we can almost get a decent extraction on that. Let's take a look at the primary mat here. We're not quite able to get all of the details what we want on the edges, especially at the top here, without without really seriously compromising our background. So that's not gonna fly there, unfortunately. So let's just turn off the processing on the keyer there and come to our power mat. But power mat works in a very different way. So instead of using the keyer controls where we have, limited amount of local control, we can't sort of isolate out one certain area here, give that one kind of effect, and then work on another section and give that another type of keyer. And it's different also to the roto as well. We're not having to come in and get perfect shapes going on our object. It's a very interesting little tool that we have here. So we are going to be drawing shapes, and these are going to be marking off what our foreground and our background areas are. And these don't have to be anywhere near as accurate as the shapes that we would be doing for a regular roto session. So let's come in, let's just zoom out a little bit here, come in and create our first shape, and let's look at the footage before we do anything else. So we have limited movement on the gun itself. The head shifts up and down a little bit. The gun moves very slightly, and the body moves also very slightly as well. So it's not a huge amount of movement in the background. So I think if we get a decent rough shape coming in here, then that's going to be good enough to start with. So one of the things I'm going to be doing when working with the power mat, and we'll see this actually why we're doing this a lot more in this moment, is changing us to foreground view when I'm working to create shapes and start to keyframe shapes up, simply because it is going to save us a lot of time, especially when we start processing things out. So I'm not going to be hugely accurate with this here. All I want to do is get a rough outline of what the shapes of what the background element actually is going to be, and make sure that I'm not intersecting with the other area. Let's come up, take his head up there a little bit. So this is going to be rather fast and loose, and let's call this one background upper. And create our next shape, which is going to be on the side here. Let's look where, probably it's around about there where the gun is furthest over. Let's just transform this up. Again, don't have to be too accurate in the first instance. We'll get into why that is in just a moment. And this is background right. No, it's not, it's background left. And let's group these together. Into a shape called background, and let's just select both of these. Come up into our object type up here. Select background. And these are also filled background shapes. So we know that everything that's within this shape is actually part of the background rather than just the line that we've drawn here. And let's come in to work on the gun. So I'm going to create a new layer here. Call this one gun. And just because we're doing rough shapes doesn't mean, we should forget our fundamentals. Let's come into the motion tracker. Find a good place to track. Probably that area there is pretty safe bet. Yep, it's looking good. So apply that there. Cool. Okay. Let's come back in and create a new shape. Now again, I don't have to be hugely accurate with this. All I want to do is mark in the general area of the shape, making sure that I do cross the colours and define the colours that are part of the gun. So I'm not just taking in the dark areas down here. I'm also coming in and taking in these blues that are part of the shine going on there. Cool, and let's see what our motion track has done. That's all right up until about there. I also don't want to get too close to the edge right this very moment, because that could also go against me in the long run. So it is just a rather loose shape that I'm creating. Cool, and just cool, so let's have a look at that. It's looking all right. Say very straightforward so far. And again, we have to define what sort of object this is. So come out to our type. This is a foreground. This is also filled. Cool. So now I want to come into my composite. It takes a little while just to think about this and process this frame out. But what it's doing now is it's generating up. Let's turn off my overlays. It's just generating up a map based on these shapes that I've given it. So let's have a little look, and if I process this through, you can see it's actually made quite a decent job of isolating this gun out. So it's got in actually quite a bit of the stuff like that I wanted to keep in, things like motion blur, which is nice. It's taken in the glints and glares here, but there's some slight contamination with the background going on here. So what is it actually doing? Well, let's take us out of composite view and take us into tri-map view here, and let's just full screen this. So tri-map view is starting to give us an indication of actually what's kind of going on behind the scenes. We've got three different colours. We have white, grey and black. Now white is the stuff that we have defined as foreground and is going to be kept in. Black is the stuff that we've defined as background and is always going to be taken out. And the grey stuff here, which is the big stuff here, is areas that we've told Silhouette to go and figure out itself. And this is what the power mat is actually doing, is it's looking at the areas we've defined as white and the areas we've defined as black to figure out how it processes out this grey stuff here. And the more grey we have, the longer it takes to process. So by filling in lots of information here, we can actually speed up our processing times there. So if we come in here and I just adjust this white down just a little bit, or this shape down here, so that in the tri-map the white is a little bit smaller. Come back to my composite here, it's going to process this out again, but this time it's cleaned up the edges a lot more, so we don't have that light grey around that we had before. So we've now got a good separation out between our gun and the background. So this can actually be a really cool and fast way of generating up some quite complex mats. So let's come back into our foreground here. We'll take a look at the hair now. Let's come in. Call this hair. And let's create a simple shape again. Let's come over here. And what it is I'm trying to do is I'm trying to include all of the colours that are contained within the hair. So that includes the shiny highlights as well as the dark shadows of the hair as well. And then let's come up to our type, and again we'll set that as foreground and filled, and come to our composite here and let that process through one more time. See, it's starting to process through a little bit quicker, and if we just zoom in a little bit now, you can start to see we are actually picking up a good amount of the hairs. So this is actually a really good sign. So we still have quite a bit of contamination going on with the background here, and we've got a few different ways of handling this. One of them is to actually come in, and I probably don't want to do it that way. I'm going to do a multi-frame here and just make sure that our background is, come back into the foreground. Just make sure our background is defined as well as it can be. Keeping the keyframes down as normal. Cool. Come back to our hair again, or our head. And seeing as we've only got one keyframe on there, we'll just tighten this up a little bit. Cool, and then come back into our composite mode. I'm just hitting 1 on the keyboard to move us into composite. Still getting a couple of issues at the top, but the sides are starting to work themselves out. So instead of going in and getting really just amazingly close here, what we can also do is we can come into the node over here and start to play with the artifact. If I turn this up just a little bit, nothing's actually going to happen yet, even though I've got my update set to drag. It's like if everything started to update as we started to drag through here, it just would slow the system down just far too much. So we can either come in and set our manual update, so we have to hit the enter key on the number pad, which is all cool. Actually has worked out quite nicely. Or the other way of doing it, I'm going to set my update back to drag here. The other way of doing it is to just refresh the cache just by moving into one of the other views and then moving back to composite. So if you hit 2 and 1 on the keyboard, that will then also prompt Silhouette Effects to refresh the cache. But if we look now at the composite here, you can see that's cleaned up a whole load of the stuff we had sort of hanging around here. So now we've just got some nice hair details coming in without the rest of the stuff floating on in the back. Of course, let's actually come into the foreground again and just keyframe that up just really quickly. So come to my first frame. Then we'll check where the movement goes. It's around about there, which is frame 5. Now the only thing I really have to be sure of, or to make sure that I am I'm not coming in and pretty much the only thing I have to make sure of when I'm working with a filled shape is that I'm not coming in and accidentally sort of going over areas of the background which I want to take out. That's pretty much the only thing that I don't want to do. So once this is done, let's hit 1 again to go back into composite mode. And let's just play backwards to process that out. Cool, alright. Let's just step through this slowly. So we start to see there is a little bit of stuff starting to sneak in on the sides up here. But by and large, we're actually doing pretty well with this. So we come to one of the areas where things are poking through, which is around about here. We could start to come back into the node here and play around with the D artifact again. And let's take the D artifact up quite large, or quite high, just to see, what that's going to do. It seems to be giving us a little bit more separation in the hair, not. Which is actually not a bad thing in this case. It's probably set a little bit too high anyway. So I'm going to take this back down. But it's not really done anything to help us out on this area up here. So I'm going to come in and create another little shape. I'm going to actually create another layer up here, and I'm going to call this one corrections. And just with my X-spline again here, come in and just do a very small open shape here. So I'll just hit escape to define the open shape, come over to my reshape here. I'm probably going to lose this little bit of hair here. I'm not too worried about that. As long as we lose it consistently, it's going to look okay. And I'm going to set this one now to background, and it's not going to be filled. So let's look at what our tri-map is looking like now. Turn off the overlays. So we've started to define a few more different sort of areas coming in here. You can see that is now just a tiny line based within the larger grey shape that's going to be processed out. So let's come back to our composite mode, hit process. That's now taken that nasty area out of contention again. Come back into foreground again and make sure, let's turn our overlays back on, make sure that that's not going to be coming in and affecting the rest of the hair. So we'll just keyframe that off a very small amount, boom, boom, boom. Be frame 11 again. And the final frame. Cool. So let's add just another couple of shapes just to try and stretch out the body just a little bit more. Come in with the X-spline. New layer. Body. Bring this down. Layer order actually does count. Let's just show that for you. So we've got two shapes that are intersecting. Bring it into my body, and we will call this foreground filled. Let's look at my tri-map. So the body is at the moment at the top, going over the top of the background areas. If I take the body down underneath the background and refresh my view, then we can see it's now being cut out instead. So the background is taking precedence now. So layer order does count Cool, so let's come back in here and let's just delete that square because I don't really want that one at all. I want one just to roughly take out the body here. Now, because I know that he's really not moving all that much, I can have a slightly more complex image over here, and because I'm going to take a couple of things out for the body, let's name this shape. This is going to be back main, and start to color code things up. So our background stuff is going to be yellow, my small corrections I'll stick in green, and the main other splines I'm going to keep in red. And let's keyframe this up. So it's going to make quite a bit of a change now to not have to be absolutely pixel accurate when we're doing stuff like this. And we'll call this one foreground field, of course. Come in one more, which is going to be just for the hands. Change that to foreground and field, and again do a couple of quick keyframes on this. Might have to reshape that a little bit with the R, come back into transform with T. Cool, and we'll see if I need to fill in these areas here. I think I probably will have to, but let's just process this out and see what we've got. So you can see now, actually, once we've filled in a lot more of this space, it's actually processing through a whole load quicker than it was previously, when it had so much of that grey area of the tri-map to work out. So we've got a few bits and pieces that are looking a little bit sketchy, but generally speaking, it's actually not done too badly. So it's kept in things like motion blur, kept in some of the hair details as well. We do have a little bit of interference coming in here. Another thing we can do is, what we've been working on at the moment, is we've been working with the accuracy set to normal. This is by far the fastest way of working, especially when we're building stuff up and testing stuff. And once we've are sort of getting happy with where the results are going, we can start to bring the accuracy up to higher or even to full. We will notice actually quite a distinct change in processing speeds, especially if there's a lot of grey to be worked out, a lot of unknown areas. And it's quite fun, but sometimes actually having the accuracy set down to something less than full can give you a better result in certain situations. So it's not always a slam dunk that having everything turned up to full is going to be the best thing for you. So looking at this one here, let's come in, turn our overlays back on. I can tell actually that these highlights here on the hands are being interpreted as part of the background, so we're going to have to fill these in just a little bit. The same with the coat here, especially some of the edges down here is not perfect. So we don't have to be perfect, but we do have to be, in the relative area. So if I make sure I've got those areas covered there. Come to my reshape, just take that in a bit more. So I don't have to go all the way to the edge. I can just make sure I'm around about here. And hopefully, come back to the composite mode. That's going to bring in enough of the information to work it out for me. And things like this here, just this little dodgy detail, could make some of this area a lot better. Actually, let's come back into our foreground mode, just by adding a circle shape over onto the rest of our coat here, sort of defining this foreground area better, so it doesn't have to guess so much, and we'll be able to then pull out coat bump. Yeah, so we'll be able to pull out a better result from that, better shape from that. Come into my multi-frame, come to the hair detail here, and actually make, instead of having this as a hair, make this into a head detail, and make sure that all of our keyframes are still good. So here I just need to select a couple of these control points just to pull those back. And let's process all that out now. And we're definitely getting somewhere. Still see there's areas that we need to touch up a little bit, and I think that's some of it is where we've come a little bit too close to the edge. Yes, that's cleaned that area up quite nicely. And this bit here, we might just have to make another open correction shape. Call this part of the background. And we'll just transform that in. And this here will also now cut through that that little light that was popping in and ruining it for us at the end as well. Cool, we're getting there again. Getting closer anyway. So one of the other things we have in the node here is the sensitivity. And if I turn up the sensitivity here, so with sensitivity, the higher the sensitivity, the more the details are going to be brought out. And this can actually be at the expense of bringing in unwanted details. So we do have a bit of a juggling act to go with the sensitivity and the de-artifact. Because again, we bring in too high a de-artifact, that could have the effect of taking out too many of the blurry details for us. So we lose some of the nice motion blur that we're able to pick out otherwise. Now, another nice little option we have when we're dealing with, let's take the sensitivity down just a moment again. Yeah, so another option that we have when we're dealing with areas of sort of not full opacity, things like hair details actually, is a good one, is this color estimation here. And if I turn color estimation on and process out again, you can see that it's taking out and compensating for those background colors that are going on in the fine details. So I turn that off, reprocess. We're getting a load of the background colors obviously seeping through. We turn color estimation back on, reprocess. We're actually able to get closer to what the original colors would have been. So we're able to get darker hair that doesn't have the background seeping through, which is going to be an absolute boon for us when we if we have to replace the background. One of the problems with this approach is that we don't have a very consistent shape. The color estimation can sort of be thrown off a little bit by that, so we end up with something flickering, which is visible and not great. If we're getting that there, then we can turn the color estimation off. Now, if we do have persistently tricky areas, say for example this area of the collar here, we're spending far too much time trying to trying to fix it. The cool thing is that we can come in to our roto node again here and come up to composite here. Is that I can now come in and actually start to be building on this in just the way that we would normally do a roto. So we can come in and I'll call this one coat cleanup. Find a bit of the coat here. Cool. And on this one I can now come in and really sort of start to define a much better shape. Much cleaner shape anyway. And let's blur this up just a little bit. Just a couple of pixels. Outer blur. We'll have the motion blur on as well for later. And now let's just come back to foreground and speed through this. At the moment the power mat is processing on in the background, so I want to stop that and just get a nice quick way of coming out here. I just turn off the enabled lightning button over here, come back to my view over here, and this should be, a whole lot faster. So here's where we have to get back into the swing of things and get back into the pixel perfect areas, at least for the part where we want to fill in the details. So we come back into the composite, turn our blur back on here. Obviously it's now still keeping in that nasty stuff that we wanted to take out anyway. All we have to do to get this working properly is just to think a little bit laterally. So I'm going to come up to my X-spline tool up here and just cut out or create another shape. It's basically going to cut out the areas that I don't really want. So let's take this down to the bottom here, not inside the shape, just as a layer on its own, and turn that to subtract there. And now that is giving me the result that I need. So it's let's turn this to yellow. This is now subtracting the entire shape from my power mat, and then we're using the shape that we just created just to fill in that gap again. Now the reason we have to do it this way is that if I try to add this into a layer on its own, even if I had this layer set to subtract here, it's still not going to work. So we actually have to have the shape itself outside of a layer, so just on its on the bottom there. And now let's just quickly, we'll actually give this a name. We'll call this BG Cleanup. And let's come in and quickly see if we need to keyframe this. Yeah. Shift this down. I don't have to be too accurate so long as we're not cutting out any of the shape that we don't really want to. So here, for example, that's not looking particularly great. So I can intersect with this red shape as much as I like. Just want to be careful of not cutting out the other stuff too much, or at all, I should say. Cool, all right. Let's play that through. Give this a bit of the old motion blur. Motion blur is enabled. Blur up this shape a little bit more. Let's do a bit of an inner blur, I think. Center blur. Yeah. That's beginning to work. Cool. So you can see how quickly we've been able to build up a quite complex mat. Now, it's not perfect. We still need to come in and finesse a few things, finesse a few edges around here. This is one of the things I was talking about right at the beginning of the class, about why Power Mat just, sometimes isn't suitable. Because you will find that there is footage that you just can't get a clean edge on. Either it's too noisy or there's too much going on, too many changes happening so quickly that it's impossible to get a nice, smooth, consistent edge. Now, if it's a fast-moving shot and you don't need to be 100% accurate, that's going to be fair enough. That's going to be fine. But if you do need, completely clean, consistent edges, you can only get that by doing the hand roto stuff. Similarly, this method is only going to be creating a mat for you. So if you need to deliver shapes, again, this method isn't going to help you out. You're going to be using the regular roto tools anyway. One of the things that is actually quite surprising about the Power Mat is actually how good it is at separating out stuff, even when you don't think there's going to be a particularly good amount of separation. Cool, but I hope that's been useful for you and given you a slight insight into the world of the Power Mat. And just like every week, I really look forward to hearing from you in the forums. So if you've got a question, a comment, or even something to show, then just post that in the forums, and I look forward to seeing you in there. But for another week, my name's Ben Brownlee, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks a lot.